Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship and the ministry of bbfohio.com, a free Bible teaching ministry. I am Pastor Greg Miller, and all of our video and audio messages can be found at bbfohio.com and can be heard on our 24-hour internet radio station at bbfohioradio.com, where we invite you to visit and learn the King James Bible with us. As we get into our study, as we've emphasized, we're going line upon line, precept upon precept, and already the messages that we've uploaded, because this is, I think, about the 6th or 7th that we've done in Revelation 17, and already getting emails and notes from people saying that this is totally, first of all, it's something they've never heard before, and it's helping them. They're seeing this in a way they've never seen it before, but they can see who the great whore is, who the mystery Babylon is. Already, we've only got a few of them up. And I just think this series is really going to set some people on the solid rock of truth that right now they're not there. And tonight we're going to look at this line upon line, I said phrase upon phrase. Scripture clearly identifies Vatican City-State as the only religio-political organization on earth to meet every single qualifying mark. I want you to keep that in mind. You can find some of these things we studied and you'll find, oh, well, that can apply here, or that can apply to that group, or that can apply to this. But only one organization, religious and political organization, meets every single one of these. And that is the Vatican City-State, Vatican State Church. And so in Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, read that with me. So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-collared beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, we've gone over that passage a couple of times and gone line on line, and the woman, or the great whore, has these 7 heads and 10 horns. And now it's kind of interchangeable. You have different people, different discussions on this, but it says, I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-collared beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman represents the organization or the system. The beast is the person of the Antichrist. And so this system is identified as having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, if you have not studied this, you look at that and you're saying, what in the world? Well, how do we know that? Well, the Bible isn't always this clear, but in this instance, we're going to see, we're not going to guess at all tonight. The Bible tells us exactly what these are. Let's keep going. We'll see that the Bible tells us exactly what these are, the 7 heads and 10 horns. You just kind of point them in your mind here. We're going to look. We'll see the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And we'll start with the 7 heads since they came first. And we're not left to guess what these 7 heads are, because in the same chapter in verse 9, it plainly tells us. Read that with me. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So there's no guessing. Dave Hunt says this again, quote, here is no mystical or allegorical language, but an unambiguous statement in plain words. The woman is that great city. There is no justification for seeking some other hidden meaning. As I said, that's what everybody's doing today. Yet books have been written and sermons preached insisting that Mystery Babylon is the United States. That is clearly not the case, for the United States is a country, not a city. And we emphasized that in a previous study. I won't reteach that. But in a previous study, we made that clear. And he continues and says, furthermore, she is a city built on 7 hills. That specification eliminates ancient Babylon. Only one city has for more than 2,000 years been known as the city on 7 hills. That city is Rome. The Catholic Encyclopedia, which I mentioned before, comes from Thomas Nelson, 1976. I just ordered my copy, by the way. Quote, it is within the city of Rome, called the City of 7 Hills, that the entire area of Vatican State proper is now confined. These are the names. I won't try again to pronounce all those. The names of the 7 mountains, and Vatican Hill, interestingly enough, sits off across the Tiber, overlooking these 7 hills in Rome. But as we said, all the embassies that other nations have established with Vatican State are in Rome. It's just kind of wild how she calls herself the Mother Church, and the Bible calls it Mother of Harlots. And she's overlooking Rome, which she owns. She just doesn't have the title deed right now. Symbolically waiting to officially usurp again her place of power over Rome. Vatican State, we'll review some of this again later, but Vatican State is a member nation of the European Union and the United Nations, and there will come a time when the Pope will sit as president of Europe. Mark it down.
Amen.
Now here's a map. Here is Vatican Hill across the Tiber, looking over the 7 hills or 7 mountains. It's kind of perched up there. Did everybody get a good look at that? Now, modern Laodiceans try to downplay this by saying, there are other cities built on 7 hills. Actually, a lot of them sound like this. There are other cities built on 7 hills. They're stuck on stupid. That's why I put that up there. Here are some examples, and I can see why they might think that it may not be Rome. First of all, Cincinnati, Ohio could be. It's built on 7 hills. Or Albany, New York is another possibility. Doesn't that sound possible? Don't you think the Apostle John might have been talking about Albany, New York? Or Kampala, Uganda? Or Athens, Texas? Or Lynchburg, Virginia? Or then there's 7 Hills, Ohio.
Whoa, dang.
Could be. Or Rome, Georgia, which I spelled wrong. Georgia. 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 I got Georgia on my mind.
Wow.
As you can see, and there's a huge list that you can find online, but none of them have any claim to any of the things outlined in Revelation 17. It's just ridiculous to even bring that up. So it says having 7 heads and 10 horns. So what about these 10 horns? Well, we're not left to guess what these 10 horns are. Verse 12 tells us plainly, these 10 horns, in verse 12, read that with me. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now that's pretty clear. I don't think you have to cut up the chicken liver and look at it or divine. I mean, it's pretty clear, isn't it? The 10 horns are 10 kings. And while this is not this is yet to be undeniably confirmed as of yet. Let me read that. While this has not been undeniably confirmed as of yet, the Club of Rome has set the stage. How many of you heard of the Club of Rome? All right. Here's a map of the 10 regional empires as set up by the Club of Rome, and I can't remember the year off the top of my head, but I think you're talking about the 1950s when this was set up. And it was set up for world government, while everybody was told, all these people who were warning about world government, they're a bunch of conspiracy theorists and they're crazy. Now you can go on the internet and you can see all the major news outlets and talk show hosts are all openly admitting they know that there's a one world government in the works. But back here, when the Club of Rome set it up, and people would say, wait a minute, I'm not making this up. This is the most powerful and wealthy people on the planet who got together and came up with this 10-region world government system that they want to implement. Who's making this up? Who's the conspiracy theorist? Nobody. It was done. It's a fact. But that's what they've set it up. Now, what we are seeing in our part of the world is this thing called the North American Union. And North American Union was basically set up under NAFTA when Bill Clinton was president, and it's been reinforced. Bush has passed signed other legislation. Obama's signed other legislation that has made this even more expansive than it was back then. But I want to show you this. This is Walter Cronkite.
Well, we have been trying to discover if in fact there is an American ruling class.
I'm afraid there is. I don't think it serves democracy well if that is true, but I think there is. The ruling class is the rich who really command our industry, our commerce, our finance, and those people are able to so manipulate our democracy that they really control the democracy, I feel.
Now, that is exactly right. But for up until recently, you were called a lunatic and mocked and made fun of if you said that. But this is the most trusted man in news up until he retired, telling you that there is a ruling class, and they are changing our country. They are changing our Constitution. They are changing the world. And they are involved in this Club of Rome. It's the people he's talking about. Go, you look it up. The people Walter Cronkite is talking about are members of the Club of Rome, and they are members of other global organizations. You can find them meeting at the Bohemian Grove. I think it's every June. You can find them at the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission. Most of those same people are the appointees to the United Nations and other organizations. There's a huge list of organizations now who are like the Club of Rome, are making this happen, and that's exactly what Walter Cronkite is talking about. It is a purposeful change taking place. Our Constitution right now is on life support, folks. I mean, right now, we have come close twice to the United States Senate passing a treaty that then the President would sign and make law that would subject our nation to the United Nations. We have come close on two different occasions of that happening. Go look at your Constitution. All treaties with foreign countries supersede the Constitution. You want to know why that's in your Constitution? Because the Constitution was put together by a bunch of Illuminatists and Freemasons who wanted world government. And they set our Constitution up to fail from the very start. They said, we will have a constitutional government, but eventually, at some point, we want a world federal system. And so your federal government set up as a constitutional republic is sovereign until the Senate passes that treaty, and you watch and see, it'll be the Pope at the table when that happens.
Amen.
It'll be a world government set up, and the Pope will be the head of the table. Now, when you zoom into that North American region, that's called the North American Union. And this is what that map basically looks like. And this is already in the works. You weren't asked, and there was no public discussion about this, but this is a highway system that is running from Canada through Mexico to connect. It's just like you have an interstate system that connects the entire country. Eisenhower was largely responsible for our interstate system. Al Gore created the internet. But Eisenhower, as tongue-in-cheek, Eisenhower was largely responsible for those interstates we all love to travel on because we get from A to B in no time flat. Well, this is this is not interstate, this is international. And it is to connect so that trucks can flow and goods can flow. It sounds good. It's a boon for the economy. That's how they're selling it. And it's like veins. When you have a body, you've got to have a circulatory system and veins, and that's what this is like. And it's already happening. It's already happening. If you didn't know that was happening, that's just an example of why I'm constantly telling Christians, we got to wake up. Got to wake up. This is happening before our eyes, although some of us aren't seeing it. It's there to be seen. A congressman, a general, and a journalist are going to confirm what I just said.
That this is a community with a border going through it.
Boldly proclaimed
Petraeus.
Becoming North American Decades as the title now. It's founded on recognition that if you put these three economies together, as has been the case 20 years into the North American Free Trade Act implementation,
NAFTA.
You find unique countries in terms of demographics.
We're all Americans in this hemisphere, North and South America, and this crisis that some call a crisis, we have to view as an opportunity.
That there is a move on the left, globalist move, to create a North American Union. And we saw it even under President Bush with the Security and Prosperity Partnership in North America. These themes don't stop. And key to getting this to succeed, there's two keys. One is it has to be a stealth methodology. In other words, the globalists and the politicians like President Obama advancing this agenda have to be able to deny they're doing it. And secondly, it has to be done in a gradual enough way so that people don't catch on, or so the next step seems natural or logical. I mean, 20 years ago, if you'd had this influx of kids across the border, and they're not kids coming across the border, these are predominantly teenagers. A great number of them are gang members, drug cartel dealers, mixed in with criminals, terrorists. I mean, we're doing no background checks. We're doing no health checks. And it's not a refugee problem. This is a created crisis to flood the border with children, maybe 200,000 of them. Because the play the globalists, the Democratic left are making is that Americans will be too soft-hearted. We won't want to, send these kids back home.
Yeah.
And in the process, what we do is we blur the border. 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been tolerated, but today...
You get what he's saying? And listen, it's going to happen. They're going to force this to happen. Right now, what we're seeing along the border is an influx of illegal immigrants. Folks, I support, and I believe it's biblical, to support immigration. Legal immigration. But the Bible says in the end times that law will be thrown out the window. It'll be an age of lawlessness. And so here we have our politicians who lied to God when they took an oath to protect and uphold our Constitution. They're liars. And they are throwing our Constitution out the window and allowing this influx of illegal immigrants, most of whom are criminals, coming in through the South, raping women, bringing drugs, robbing, stealing, pilfering. Your government's doing that to you. And those southern states are feeling it first, but it's going to come through the rest of the country. It's all being done because President Obama isn't an American. And I'm not even talking about the birther thing. I'm talking about the fact that philosophically, he is not an American. He's a global citizen. Hillary Clinton is a global citizen. All these, Pelosi, she was just telling you, she's a global citizen. These people do not see themselves as red-blooded Americans. They see themselves as global citizens, and they are going to do everything they can, and they don't care to break the law. They don't care to violate the Constitution. They're going to do everything they can to push this global system as much as they can, as quickly as they can. And there's coming an Antichrist. And this Antichrist is a man of lawlessness. He's the son of perdition. And he will push, and he'll change the laws. He'll change the times. He'll change whatever he needs to do. Everything will go out the window. He'll do whatever he has to do. And he'll do it illegally when needed. He will push it through to get this thing done. And he will be sitting on a throne in Rome, head of the European Union, And then midway through the tribulation period, he moves his throne to Jerusalem. And that's when he walks into the temple and declares himself to be God. It's all going to happen just like that. Now, the Antichrist, we look at these 10 horns. I gave you that background so you understand. The Antichrist is going to come and knock off 3, and then he's going to rule over the remaining 7. In Revelation 17:12, read that with me. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. Oh, read it again. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. Yes? What's the right verse? I didn't... Oh, it's Daniel 7:24. The 10 horns, and we studied this in Daniel 7, but I think we had some technical difficulties on that, and we'll have to revisit that at a future date. The 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and it says he shall subdue 3 of those. So he is going to rule over the remaining 7. And the blueprint for this has already been laid out in this one world government. And here's the beast version of that map that the Club of Rome showed you earlier. You're going to have the European, this is the North American Union, and this is be the South American Union, the African Union, the European Union is already there, and eventually after Gog-Magog War, I believe, after that Russia will join Europe. And then you have the what might be called the Middle Eastern Union, and then the Asian or South Pacific Union, which, you know, and what they call them eventually we don't know for sure. I'm just saying that's the names they're giving to them right now. And so that's the world government map. Instead of 50 states, this will be where you identify yourself when you send mail and everything. When you say where you live, I live in the North American Union. That's what I call the beast version of that map. Now keep in mind there will be pockets of resistance against this world system. Not everybody. There's a bit of a false idea that when the Antichrist comes, the whole world worships him and no one opposes him except for 144,000 Jews and believers of the gospel. There's actually going to be people who are not born-again Christians in the sense of, you know, we think of Christians today. That doesn't happen during the tribulation period. So you have to keep that in mind. People are going to believe the message, and if they endure to the end, they're saved. So a lot of Christians have the false idea when they think of the Great Tribulation, it's like a Billy Graham crusade and people get born again and they're eternally secure. That's not true. And during the tribulation period, you believe the message, the gospel being preached, which is not the gospel being preached now. And it's Revelation 14, the gospel being preached is, you missed it, Jesus is Lord, He's going to return, He's going to judge the world, don't take the mark or you go to hell. That's the gospel being preached during the tribulation period. Now those people, there will be people who believe that and don't take the mark, and they either are killed, most of them losing their heads, they'll be in heaven. The ones who survive and endure to the end, they actually go into the kingdom, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. They still are mortal. And there will be some, Jesus talks about this as the judgment of the nations, the goats and the sheep. And those are allowed into the kingdom if they haven't taken the mark and they supported the Jews. And they showed support for the Jews in the state of Israel during the tribulation period. That's what he says. He tells them that's how you've done. You've heard this used. They use it for charity a lot. If you've done this to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. The context is Israel and the Jews, not poor people out on the street. But it sounds good. It makes a lot of money, so that's why people quote it like that. But in Daniel 11:41, here's an example. This isn't the only one, but we don't have time to run all these references tonight. But in Daniel 11:41, it talks about some of these sheep nations who are against the Antichrist during that tribulation period. It says, he, talking about the Antichrist, shall enter also into the glorious land, that's Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. But note, it says many, not all. And it says, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. And we can identify those areas on a map. They're right around Israel, including what we call today Jordan and the West Bank and Lebanon. And it may also include some of Saudi Arabia, and there's other references that seem to make it appear that Egypt and Saudi Arabia will be two other countries that will not be taken by the Antichrist. Now, that involves a lot of things. There's geopolitical changes taking place now. You have the Gog-Magog war. You have the rapture. You have a lot of things that are going to change the face of planet Earth before all this starts to happen. So the stage is set for the coming world government. And I've got a little question mark there, but that's a picture of the Pope on his throne. And that's Vatican world government. It's coming. And that is what this is all about. And again, for you, I want to encourage you to learn this, folks, to be able to understand this, because it lifts you up. It gives you a spiritual lift to understand that God is working right here in your lifetime. But folks, your Christian friends, your Christian family, they don't know this stuff. And so you take this week after week and you study it and you take note and you note it mentally, you write it down, you think it through, you understand it. Then you can tell people what's going on. And I'm here to tell you that there are people who are saved today because somebody they knew as a Christian said, you watch what's going to happen. And they would tell them, this is what's going to happen. And you're going to see these things continue to take place. And all of a sudden, when they start seeing it, they realize that Bible is the Word of God. Amen. Prophecy is one of the greatest and most seldom used tools of evangelism. Yeah. You can show people. There are Jews today who are believers because they were old enough to see what was like before, even some going back to before they were even a nation. And others saw what happened in 67 and 71, or it was 71 when Yom Kippur? 73. Yeah, 67 and 73. And now they see how everything is shaping up. You can't look at a map and see the nation of Israel, this tiny little sliver of land surrounded by all this territory and how much is it? Something like, I can't remember the number now. It's like 3.5 billion people around it that is their enemy. And they have, I think 12 million. They're outnumbered some huge number. We'd say 100 to 1 or something. It's a huge number. Yeah, it's a huge number. And they're just trying to have this little tiny piece of land the size of New Jersey to live on. There's no explanation for that outside of the fact that God is in control.
Of ages, wait for me, let me hide.